Good morning. This is Haley Solomon with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Director of Housing Policy, Stephanie Watkins-Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. I hope that you all are having a great week so far. To all of those that attended our Bringing It Home conference last week, it was so nice seeing and meeting you all. Thank you for a great 2 days of sessions of conversation and of laughter. There are a lot of great moments, and it was really wonderful being in person again. And I know for me, it was really great to meet a lot of people for the first time. So thank you again for attending, and we can't wait to see a lot of you again in the fall for our conference, September 5th and 6th. Moving on to federal updates. The Department of Housing and Urban Development closed a $14.8 million transaction in Chapel Hill to build new affordable rental homes. This is a marking of Chapel Hill breaking ground on the Trinity Court development. It's part of a rental assistance demonstration, or RAD, transaction. The town is going to work with the developer to demolish the Trinity Court Apartments, which is a public housing community that was built in 1975. It closed in 2018 due to poor building conditions, and in its place will be 56 new energy-efficient, affordable units. The $14.8 million project is financed through the leveraging of several different public and private funding sources, including 9% tax credits, as well as funding from the town of Chapel Hill. Moving on to state updates. So at the very end of last month, the Insurance Commissioner, Mike Causey, approved an average dwelling rate increase of 8% for insurance premiums. So this will be the second year in a row that we will be seeing an increase in premiums. The North Carolina Insurance Commissioner announced that he has negotiated this 8% dwelling rate increase, and that the hearing that was originally to be scheduled or was going to happen on July 22nd will actually be canceled. In this instance, dwelling insurance is typically for owners of small investment properties such as single-family and small apartments. So those landlords would be impacted by this. Just for some additional context, last January in 2023, the Causey also granted a rate hike, and it averaged 10% statewide on dwelling policies. This was after a proposed statewide average increase of 50.6%. So again, last year, premiums went up on average 10%. That means it could still vary depending on the territory itself. And this new negotiated rate is an average 8% increase across the state. These increases will begin to hit folks this fall, and it will still vary by territory. So the 8% may not be the actual number or increase that folks see. The different settlements, there's an 8-page settlement document that we'll link in the call notes for you. It also contains rates for fire building and contents in all territories, and it also raises extended coverage buildings in a few territories, like in the coast. The original request or proposal from the Rate Bureau actually called for more of an increase of over 75% on new and renewing wind and hail policies for vacation and full-time rental houses on the Outer Banks. And it also asked to hit those in what they label as Territory 110, which is on the coast, and it's often the hardest hit when it comes to natural disasters. Just for additional history, a settlement has usually been reached in every request made by the Rate Bureau, both on property and auto insurance changes, since about 2016. So we'll continue to follow this, see what it means for additional policies and coverages. There are still likely some folks that will see some of their premiums jump, again, because it does vary by territory, and so we hope to have some additional details and be able to kind of pick apart the settlement agreement a bit and translate what that will mean. Moving on to state legislative updates. So we're continuing to update and work on our bill tracker, but we just want to remind folks that you can still see the bills that we're following, what categories they fall in, kind of how they're moving or not moving, by a link that we'll include in the call notes. I also note that I've been getting a few emails about where can you find the bill tracker on the website. So we are currently working on finding a place for it on the website. But you can always go to the podcast or housing call section of our website and look for Bill Tracker or search Bill Tracker in our call notes, and that link will pop up. And as an additional reminder, we want to continue to encourage you all to emphasize some of the calls to action that we've been communicating for the last several weeks. And also still from our legislative day of action a few weeks ago towards the end of May. We want to continue to ask our elected officials of the state to grow the North Carolina Housing Trust Fund. It's really important that this critical and versatile pillar of our housing ecosystem can actually meet the diverse housing needs across North Carolina and function as a true statewide resource. And as it's currently funded, it's unable to do so. We need funding, we need resources that can actually meet the scale of the need. We also are asking folks to request that the Workforce Housing Loan Program, or the WELP program, become a recurring allocation and that its allocation also be increased. These are two really critical housing resources for our state that make the development and preservation of affordable housing, as well as several other housing programs, possible. And so they really need to be invested in as much as possible and also to be solidified so that they can be sustainable long term. We also want to encourage our elected officials for any leftover federal dollars to be invested back into housing. Housing development is really well equipped to spend dollars from the American Rescue Plan Act or state local fiscal recovery fund. So we want those dollars to go to housing so that they can go into creating and putting more units on the ground, preserving more units, and again, continuing to address this growing need that we have in our state. We also want them to prepare for the end of disaster relief dollars and think about what it means to actually plan for long-term sustainability and resiliency. We want them to think about how to leverage the expertise and lessons that we've learned from our most recent disaster responses, both good and bad, and improve our state infrastructure so that our state can be equipped to better respond both in disaster and non-disaster times. So that doesn't just mean thinking about recovery, but it means thinking about the resiliency element as well. And last, but certainly not least, we want them to consider how to improve statewide coordination of housing functions and resources so we can optimize resource allocation, meaning we can make it more efficient, more effective, reducing the duplication of efforts, and to be able to address housing needs more comprehensively, and something that'll also help facilitate that collaboration that we really need as we continue to address this problem. Moving to local updates, Laurel Street celebrated a groundbreaking of mixed-income, multi-generational apartment community opened in Charlotte. This groundbreaking will be for a development titled Spring House Square. It's going to offer 136 affordable apartments and 100 market-rate apartments. 200 of the apartments are going to be reserved for seniors, along with larger affordable apartments that are designed for about 36 families. The total development cost is projected to be around $68 million, and the financing is made possible through several different funding sources: the City of Charlotte's Housing Trust Fund, bond deals from the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, the Charlotte Housing Opportunity Investment Fund, the Black Economic Development Fund, and various private lenders. Again, another great example of public and private dollars and partnerships, coming together to make housing happen, and just how much it takes to make that happen. So congratulations to Laurel Street on that groundbreaking. The Winston-Salem City Council also recently approved a deal to sell 4 city-owned lots in the Southwest Ward community to the Moravian Church for $1 each. The church plans to develop these lots into 4 single-family affordable homes or homeownership opportunities. And in addition to this deal, the council approved about $160,000 in American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA funds for gap financing for the project. The Cottages of Idlewild, a proposed affordable homeownership and rental community in downtown Raleigh, recently completed its fundraising goal when the Wake County Commissioners allocated almost $1 million, a little around $910,000 to the project. So these funds, along with $700,000 from the city, will provide gap funding, funding and financing needed to construct a mix of 18 affordable rental and homeownership cottages to low-income families. And these homeownership opportunities will operate under the Community Land Trust model facilitated by the Raleigh Area Land Trust. So congratulations to Wake, to Raleigh, and to the Raleigh Area Land Trust on securing this gap financing. In Vance County, unfortunately, 150 people, and that includes 72 children, were displaced last month after an extended stay. Motel in Henderson partially collapsed, which forced the building to be condemned. The state is paying for families to stay in nearby hotels while families search for housing and students finish the school year. And then various housing nonprofits are working diligently to help the remaining families secure housing. On the East Coast, the New Hanover Community Endowment launches their affordable housing strategy. They recently announced that they are creating a $19 million affordable housing investment strategy. And they created this strategy after receiving over $50 million in housing-related requests last year alone. This strategy is going to focus on allocating funds to housing providers and developers across the county using a three-pronged approach that focuses on stabilization, production, and capital. New Hanover County is ranked 9th among North Carolina's 100 counties for the largest proportion of households that are cost burdened. So in other words, 34% of New Hanover County households spend more than 30% of their income on housing-related expenses. So this is good news, and yet another example of the many that we talked through today of just how many sources, how many partners, how many groups are really needed to make affordable housing happen in all its form in a community. Moving on to events, we have a lot of great events happening. Just want to lift up a few. So today from 2 to 3 p.m., we have a webinar that's actually being hosted by the National Fair Housing Alliance titled Advancing Equity with First-Generation Home Buyer Programs. It features two awesome folks that we know well and respect from North Carolina, Nikitra Bailey and Tracy Caloris. We are also going to highlight at the same time, so if you're part of a team and you want to kind of split and go to both, also today from 2 to 3 p.m. is a webinar that talks about using the Grants Pass decision to reframe the homelessness conversation and gain supporters for justice. This is being hosted by The Case Made, and will also be featuring Dr. Tiffany Manuel with special guests, the CEO of the National Alliance in Homelessness, Ann Oliva, and Marisol Bello, the Executive Director of the Housing Narrative Lab, which we had the honor of having as our keynote last week. Also want to lift up tomorrow, there's another webinar titled AI 101 for Civil and Human Rights Advocates, being hosted by the National Fair Housing Alliance. And this session is specifically focused on trying to demystify AI's role, potential, and pitfalls in housing and lending. So definitely seeing a lot more of these events happening. On June 20th, there will be a webinar hosted by the Urban Institute in collaboration with the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities from 1 to 2:30 p.m., where they'll look at lessons from 40 years of public housing policy and where do we go from here. And right before that, the Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard will be releasing their findings and talking through them in an online webinar for their State of the Nation's Housing 2024 report. And reports and resources, again, we have lots of links to go through. Just want to list up a few. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition, in collaboration with Public and Affordable Housing Research Corporation, has released a National Risk Index and Racial Equity for Renters resource. Definitely check this out. The American Planning Association and the National League of Cities have released what they call a Housing Supply Accelerator Playbook. And the Joint Center of Housing Studies of Harvard University has released a report talking about the importance of rebuilding the construction trades workforce. In the news, housing is definitely, there's no shortage of headlines with housing. in the news. Locally, we want to give a shout out to Greg over at the North Carolina Newsline. Several pieces highlighting the conversations and the sessions that happened last week at our Bringing It Home conference. So we have those linked in the call notes. And then several pieces that highlight some of the disparate impacts and systemic racism experiences that people are having as renters, as potential home buyers, and then also the growing affordable housing crisis. I'm going to leave that there because there's too many to describe. Again, thank you all so much to the folks who were able to make it to Bringing It Home. Thank you all for listening. And as always, if you have any questions or you want us to talk about anything in particular, please don't hesitate to reach out. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you next time.